How is everybody doing? And welcome back for another Strength Chat episode. Today, I'm joined by a very special guest for you all. He is a coach with Reactive Training Systems. He's also a two-time powerlifting Masters World Champion. Today, I am joined by the one and only Ross Leppala. How are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic, Stephen. I appreciate you asking me to join you today. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Thanks a lot for taking the time to jump on. I suppose the first question is, yeah, how are you? What's kind of been happening in your world recently?
Oh man, doing well, doing well. I got a little bit of an injury last World, so been kind of trying to take care of that and getting to that point now where I'm finally starting to feel good to start pushing on the gas pedal again, which is, always exciting whenever we're trying to push our boundaries and our edges. It's hard to have to pull off the gas pedal, yet it's sometimes it's needed. We have to take care of our well-being, and getting to that point's really nice. And that's become a more important aspect of my life. When you have a kid, it changes everything. When you don't have a kid, you can be a little bit more reckless with your physical health, and you don't have as much cost demand on that. But man, you have a kid, it changes everything, and playing with a kid is far more important than any powerlifting PR that will ever happen. So had to get healthy, and now we're there again.
Yeah, yeah, cool. I think that's and you might get used to over this chat that I'm used to a tangent here and there, but I think that's really important because especially with other coaches, other powerlifters that I've spoken to, sometimes for a long period of time it's just kind of powerlifting, and then all of a sudden these other aspects come in, and it's like, okay, so I can, still do X, Y, or Z, and powerlifting's still gonna be there, competitions are still gonna be there, and then you can still keep working through it rather than kind of feeling as though everything has to be kind of a this or that or a sacrifice. Would you kind of agree with that?
Yeah, it's definitely interesting when you see younger lifters that are, all in, so to speak, and willing to make all those sacrifices until you have something that comes along that shakes up the level of importance in your life. And a kid will do that. Oftentimes it seems like relationships don't necessarily do that because your partner is supportive and they're also their own person. But that little kid is they're not their own person yet.
Yeah.
They rely on you for everything. And yeah, it just changes everything. So learning to balance that out and realize that it doesn't mean that lifting and powerlifting go away. And in all honesty, I've had that thought before too, where the sport of powerlifting is just a vehicle, and we change vehicles all the time. A truck runs out, a car runs dry, whatever, and you change it, you get a different one, you swap it out. And I like if the sport of powerlifting went away today, I don't think a whole lot in my life would change other than I wouldn't have to travel to go to meets. I I train the way I train because it's the way I love to train, and it just so happens to work out for the sport of powerlifting. So I choose powerlifting. Whereas if I had a different inkling, a different drive to train a different way, I'd probably look for a different sport to help me facilitate playing on those edges.
Yeah, I think it's a good way to look at it. I'm a big fan of analogy as well, and saying there is a different excuse me, you use different cars all the time. I think is um yeah, that's a good analogy to use. So I know I did quite a brief introduction at the start, but for everyone listening who might not know your work with Reactive Training Systems, how you got into coaching, powerlifting, your own training, just want to give a little bit of a background to yourself, Ross?
Yeah, sure. I started many, many, many years ago when I was 12 years old. I found that was when I first found the weight room, and it's pretty much been a core staple of my life ever since. Um, I like to be fully transparent at points like this. I was actually suicidal at a young age, and it was the weight room that really saved my life. It gave me a place to exercise some of that pain and hurt and darkness that I carried around with me, and gave me a place to start building confidence. And it was in ninth grade back in 1999 that I did my first powerlifting meet, and I had an absolute blast. It was just a ton of fun. So I've been competing pretty much ever since then, with a short little hiatus during the end of college. There wasn't really any meets around where I was at. And then when I moved up to Alaska in 2007, I was working like 100 hours a week. So there was no training at that point post college for a couple of years, and then got back into it in 2010. 2012, I went to my first Raw National Championship, and that was like, wow, there's another level to this. Let's go. Let's get serious. So I buckled down and got more serious. I started coaching at the time on my own side with engineered athletics. And then a couple years into that, I hired Mike to share as my coach. And maybe about a year after working with him in that regard, he asked me to work for him for Reactive Training Systems part time. And I said yes, with the idea that we'd go full time in 2 to 3 years. At that point, I was still a civil structural engineer. I had this idea, this like 10 to 15-year plan that I'd walk away from engineering early and retire from it early and just coach. And then I suppose about 8 months after I started working for him, I can't remember the exact timeline, but shortly after working for him, I got laid off from my engineering job, and I called him up and I'm like, hey, that 2 to 3 year plan, what do you say we do it right now? And so we made it happen, and we made that shift. That was in 2017. So coming up on 10 years now with that. And during a lot of that time, I was also starting to do a lot of my own mental health work. I realized that while lifting helped me in my youth, I also realized it was a part of my escapism, and I needed to do something different to get my head in a better place and start to unpack some of that. So simultaneously was going through and working with a therapist, and it would have been 2018 when I finally had that moment of realization, like, oh man, I'm good. I'm really fucking good. Like, this is exciting. I need to share more of myself and more of my story. And that's when I started Project Unchained podcast and started sharing stories of mental health triumphs. A couple years ago, about a year and a half ago, no, 2 years ago, it was after the first world championship that I had this big epiphany in talking with Vanessa, like this intersection of my mental health journey and training and what it's done for me now. And that shifted Project Unchained into the intentional athlete, where when we think of our training, we ask ourselves different questions and better questions. We're gonna get more out of the training than just stronger muscles. So how does this pursuit of strength support my life?
Yeah.
And what skills am I learning while I train that allow me to show up better in life? And I think a quick way to frame that, a lot of people want to talk about limits today. A lot of people face these limitations as they go through their training. And a common one will come up like, oh, I'm scared of getting hurt. I'm scared of getting injured. It's like, is that what you're really afraid of?
Yeah.
Because if we think about it, like, what's amazing, you look at Alex Honnold just summited Taipei 101, the first skyscraper, free solo, no ropes, no nothing. I don't know if you watched that documentary at all.
No, no, I've not seen it. I've seen it advertised, but I've not watched it. I've not watched it myself, no.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible. I mean, the guy is super impressive. A lot of the free solo stuff that he's summited is just mind boggling. But I really like the line that he talked about, yeah, sure, we're all scared. We all have fear, but fear is just information,
Yeah.
right? So like, but the part that a lot of people stop at is they stop at that surface level. I'm scared of getting hurt. Are you really scared of getting hurt? Or is there something else underlying? Odds are there's something else underlying. When I had to take a step back a couple years ago because of a chronic hip injury, it was low grade. It was just kind of like I would get this click and this catch and this little sharp pain, just zing, zing every now and again on my hip. And it was becoming more and more consistent. And I made the comment to Vanessa out loud. I'm like, man, I don't know if I'd be able to run and save Rosalie right now. And the second I said that out loud, it got really real. I'm like, oh, That's the fear. It's
Yeah.
not the fear of getting hurt. It's the fear of what do I lose? What capacity and ability do I lose otherwise? And that was it for me in that moment. And it can be different things, but it's not the injury that actually scares you. And I think a common one a lot of people don't want to admit that we've had before is that we don't want to admit that we got hurt at that weight.
Yeah.
Like, is that what does that mean for my worth? Am I good enough? So that's how some of those limitations start to show up.
Yeah. And I think diving, I thought that flowed quite nicely into the topic, obviously, that I had in mind to chat about this because I think there is a little bit more of a talk around this and kind of like confidence in terms of lifting the fear that sometimes people have. And one time you said there, when you said there about, the fear of, oh, I won't be able to go and, catch your daughter or anything like that. Are these, when it becomes real, what's kind of your approach to working with other lifters of diving a little bit deeper into that? Because sometimes they can put that barrier up and, or do you believe that they kind of like self-impose those limitations and be like, no, I can't do this, and list a whole load of reasons as to why, whereas actually, is that just kind of like smoke and mirrors, and just things that actually, when you boil it down, solutions can be provided to for that, if that kind of makes sense for us.
Yeah, yeah, it makes sense. I think when you think of limitation, you start to look at real and false limitations because there's going to be real limitations. There's only so much that the physical body can do. What that is, we don't know. We don't know what that is. I mean, regardless of the sport of powerlifting, the numbers blowing out of the water the past decade, we still don't know. And it's impossible to put a measuring stick up to somebody and be like, oh, you're capable of X. That's not possible. It's kind of like a subjective, mysterious thing in the dark that we have to discover and create and cultivate. We have to pull it out. So we don't really know where that real limitation exists. But what we can look at are other real limitations that come up with, recovery, fatigue, those different things that we track that are fairly objectionable. And if we run into those, what's really important to understand is great, cool. We know that that limitation is there. Now we can use that information. Where we get a tripping point is when we take it personally, like, oh no, I'm not good enough. Well, now you just lowered the ceiling even more by placing a false limitation of belief and worth on yourself. Whereas when we take the real limitation and we understand and can assess what that is, and it changes, right? A novice lifter who has, let's say, really bad chest fall in their squat, that's their limitation. That's the real limitation. Cool information. I know how to reorganize a squat to get rid of the chest fall pattern, or at least mitigate it so it's not as severe. Now I have information to make better training choices and where to go with the development in that. Where we trip up in the false limitations is a lot of people are scared to talk about them. A lot of people are scared to admit them and go through that process. And the reason I think it's important when we ask ourselves those harder questions and look at ourselves in the mirror and like question the content of our character and what we're doing and creating and contributing towards. And we get to that point, we can make that thing that's rolling around in the back of our head that's a false limitation, that's kind of fake and we don't know about it. We can bring it forward and make it real and use it as information. You know, if I'm scared of getting hurt, why? Because I don't want to I don't want the sport of powerlifting to be more important than my daughter.
Yeah.
And when I say that out loud, it's like, oh, okay. Now that drives a whole lot of different changes. Now that allows me to make getting healthy and recovered the priority rather than pushing through pain for the sake of glory,
Yeah.
right? Like it's powerlifting. There is no fucking glory. like, yes, it's cool to win. Yes, it's awesome to win a world championship. And, You know how many people are going to remember that shit when you're 80 and on your deathbed? You. But
Yeah,
your daughter is going to remember if you skipped her dance recital to go to a powerlifting meet. She's going to feel that,
yeah,
right? So like when I said that out loud, I'm like, okay, it becomes that point where I've again like this mental health journey. I didn't have to take that personally. I didn't go, oh no, this isn't what I want. I just look at the reality of the situation and I can go, oh, okay. So I need to shift what I'm doing. I need to shift my focus point. I need to get healthy. That doesn't mean powerlifting goes away. That doesn't mean strength training goes away. It just means right now I need to take care of this ache and this pain.
yeah,
And then once I get that resolved, then I can go, then now I have new information and different information and I can change where things go.
yeah. Kind of two things that kind of jumped out to me when you were talking there. The first one is information, and whenever you have information, whether it's choosing food in a restaurant, that's information, or making a
Yeah.
choice about training, it allows you to make that choice. And I think choice is important. If you only get one choice, I think that causes, again, a different tangent, but that causes maybe more problems than solutions if there's only one way of doing it.
Yeah.
And when it comes to information, kind of the fact versus feeling, because sometimes, those feelings, people can think, oh yeah, this must be it. This is 100%. This is exactly why it is. This is the reason for it. Whereas one of the phrases that I've used before is "what can't speak can't lie." So,
Mm.
watching that lift back and seeing it about the chest fall and saying, "Well, actually, you felt like it was awful," whereas looking at it, it's fine. Looking at your recovery score, whatever else it is. So, what's kind of your take or approach to that fact versus feeling kind of like thought process? And then it's a double whammy, this one. The second part is when you were speaking about kind of, what's that why, and digging a little bit deeper. Is that something that you kind of dive into when you first start working with a lifter? Is that through regular check-ins, and that why can change the longer that you're working with a lifter? Or is it something that that lifter might have to come to a realization to themselves to then speak to you about it? I realize they're quite two big topics, but they're kind of the things that were going around my head as you were speaking.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I think if we look at again the information, it, when we're able to use that information as reality, we're not letting the information like drive our sense of worth and our sense of being. It's when we take it personally that we go, I'm not good enough. Like, oh, I chest fall pattern again. I'm not good enough. I'll never be better. You just reinforced that. You just created that and contributed to that being your reality. And that's why it continues to show up. The limitation is like self-talk. Self-talk creates the way you talk about yourself to and about, whether it be in your head or out loud to other people. The way in which you speak about yourself shapes how and what you believe about yourself, and what you believe about yourself dictates how you show up and participate in the world. So, like, what you believe will contribute to what you create, whether it be a chest fall pattern or not being able to get the promotion at work. What you believe is what you get. And like when we're able to shift towards that and understand that, then we can really start to create more. As far as like being able to discern and parse out that information and emotion and push and pull from that, there's a couple of things. I think first and foremost, again, is not taking that information personally. Second is understanding and reminding ourselves that all emotions are temporary. They are a flash in the pan. So we have to understand and remind ourselves that we can't make a decision, especially if I have an opportunity to pause and assess. We can't make a decision based on a temporary emotion. Now, obviously, sometimes there's like moments where you kind of got to just think fast and react and respond right now, and you don't have time to sit there and analyze. and you can do a post analysis and look at it that way. But the way I like to think about it and what's really helped me as well is recognize and remind myself that there's a difference between emotion and mood. And what I mean by that is like my mood, I get to choose. My attitude, I get to choose. I get to wake up and be happy. I get to wake up and be a person of gratitude and be excited for this journey. While at the same time, there's going to be moments throughout the day where it's, fuck, this happened again. Damn it. And I can be mad about something. I can be upset about something while also still being in gratitude for what I'm doing. I'm choosing my mood. The emotion is something temporary in the moment. My mood is what I'm choosing it to be. And like, if we think about powerlifting, how that can help teach us that, I often think about, when we have, you miss a lift. Let's say it's a third attempt squat. Well, you have to make the choice to not let the disappointment of missing that third attempt squat to continue to move forward through the meet, because otherwise if you let that change your mood, your bench and your deadlift are going to go to shit. Right. So being able to shift that and move away from that is a skill set in and of itself. And if we can use that platform, we can use the platform literally to help teach us that. Imagine all the other places that we can apply that skill.
Yeah, I think
So
that's the when you said there, having that as a skill. I think that is something that, and this is conversations that I've had with lifters, is there's the skill of, and hopefully this kind of makes sense, but there's the skill of lifting, which people can progress at, increase on weight, and they can lift heavy weight, and they progress through. They go from regionals, nationals, internationals, and they're flying up the board. But then there's the actual mental side of the lifting, in terms of, oh, I didn't get a PB, I missed my squat, I got a red light on this, I did that, and all of a sudden there's these things that start chipping away at that ability to manage that mood, to manage those emotions. And as you're speaking there about, I like the difference that you said between that mood and the emotion that comes out of that frustration, anger, whatever it may be. And something that that you've shared and spoken about as well is that enjoyment. Because when you mentioned earlier, you enjoy squatting, benching, and deadlifting. It just so happens that the sport of powerlifting, um, uh, the exact lifts that you train is the exact spot there. And do you think sometimes where maybe people struggle with those limitations, with the mental skill work, if that's even a phrase, of powerlifting, is there sometimes that balance of enjoyment and kind of taking it very seriously is maybe swayed one way and the other? Whereas, going back to what you said earlier about, is the glory of powerlifting, yeah, it's cool to win this, it's cool to do that. Whereas actually, if you can't play with your daughter, if you can't bend down to tie your shoelaces, was it all worth it? What's kind of your take on that, if that makes sense?
yeah, for sure. Which also honestly really blends well with your other question about talking about your why and why you lift. Like, to me, a lack of enjoyment in lifting is a disconnection from why you lift in the first place. And you've lost that. Because for me, like, one of the realizations I had when I was going through that chronic nagging hip injury, and mind you, like, that was a multiple year process. Like, I don't remember the exact timeline, but I dropped out of a meet that I was pursuing in 2019, and I don't think I hit a PR from like 2018 to like 2022. Like, it was a hot minute, and it was one of those injuries for me that, like, the pain level was never high. A lot of the day-to-day activity wasn't really influenced. I wasn't in pain. I'd feel good, and I'd go to the training session, I'd start warming up, and I'd be feeling fine. Then all of a sudden my hip would start catching and clicking. And it's like, well, what the heck? And like sometimes when I deadlift, like right around the knee, there'd be like a pinch in my hip. And like because it was kind of inconsistent, that's when I was trying to work through it and work through it and work through it. And as frustrating as that was, like I still enjoyed training because I love training. And because there's so many other things that it was teaching me. And one of the things that I like to think about that as I got towards the end of that time frame is when we are butting up against something, a lesson, life's trying to teach you something, training's trying to teach you something, and you're struggling to like move beyond it, it's because you haven't learned the lesson yet.
Yeah.
And for me, I hadn't learned the lesson yet. And at the time, like a couple of lessons that I pulled from it were one, I I needed a couple of things. One of the things that my body needed was more athletic based training and not just so hyper specific SBD, SBD, SBD. So I started doing a lot of other exercises, sprint work and plyometrics, and started to train like I did for football in high school and college again. And that was really beneficial. The other one was being way more radically honest with my day to day ability, which would also then impact my RPE ratings and my level of aggression in applying myself to the training. I had to take a step back. I had to be honest with that. As I started to climb back up out of that hole, I made the adjustment to like, and I really dug in. I'm like, you know what? I am going to honor myself more than the program, right? Like what happens a lot of times, we write this program, whether we're being coached by somebody or not, but there's like this unspoken obligation to do every single set and every single rep that's in there. And I had this realization like, dude, you do not need anybody to tell you to work harder. You need somebody to tell you to slow down. Nobody's here with you. You train alone. You got to be that person for yourself right now. So I gave myself permission to skip reps and sets when I needed to, and honoring myself in that moment to moment basis of the second my body started talking at me and was going, hey, not today. I'm like, okay. And I started to listen. And what that looked like on that very first week was warm ups. I literally got my warm ups and I started to feel like some of those underlying warning signs. And I'm like, okay, I hear you. And then like that happened for like 1 or 2 weeks. And then the second week I was able to get a little bit more. And then the third week I got a little bit more. And then the fourth week I was a little bit down because I got more the previous week and then a little bit more. And it kind of like there was a little bit of a wobble to it, but it was finally starting to climb back up in terms of what my capabilities were. And I wouldn't say that they ever I don't do as much now as I did then or as I did before that point. I do less total work, but I had to listen to that. I wouldn't have arrived at a better point. And since that, now I've hit multiple all time lifetime PRs well into my 40s. And I feel like there's a whole lot more left for me to develop if I continue to honor that moment to moment. So, like, it's that lesson that I have to honor me and my well being above and beyond the application of a training, above and beyond chasing a PR and chasing powerlifting glory that I'm still convinced that it doesn't exist. You know, I'm
Yeah.
sure maybe a winner of the Sheffield might disagree with me, but at the same time, I don't know. I don't remember who won the first Sheffield.
Yeah, yeah. I think
I,
yeah, a little bit of prize money can go a long way to help with that. So with that, you know, you're saying there about, you know, learning the lessons as you're going, and because you enjoy the training side of things. Obviously, you mentioned about how you would train, how you did football as well. How do you spin that to keep that enjoyment with the lifters that you work with as well, and balancing between that, because I can't remember the full phrase, but there is that program of you're going to get more out of a program that you enjoy and do consistently rather than a program that you don't enjoy and don't get out of. Whereas, I do believe there needs to be that balance of this needs to be done here, but also that we've got this little bit of room over here where we can have the things that you enjoy in there, and also how that kind of um, factors into keep momentum going with the
Yeah.
lifter and keep them confident in their training.
Yeah. Before I answer that, I do want to back up real quick, and I want to be mindful in my comments of the Sheffield. I want to make sure that that doesn't mean that that's not an incredible accomplishment. Like
Yeah,
that's wildly impressive and it's super cool, and I like it's amazing to see what people are becoming capable of in this day and age, and people ought to be proud of those things. Um, it's simply to say like the the volume of importance from a memory and legacy standpoint is smaller than what the amount of pressure we put on it.
yeah,
And I believe when we can reduce that pressure that is false, we actually is a stress adapt. So by to recover from my training, downplay the Sheffield or the promote complacency.
yeah.
Like I
Hey,
definitely I looks like I got unstable there,
oh, hey,
but I
back.
think it's back. Yeah.
There we go. Um, the Can you hear me? Okay.
Yep, I got you.
Yeah.
I
Um,
can start all that over if you want.
no, no,
I can edit.
I got through that. It just stuttered a little bit at
Okay.
the end. It was the video that froze more than the audio. Um,
Gotcha.
when you're talking about the Sheffield there, I know touching on that point, but um, there's levels. There's levels to that as well,
Yeah.
and the pressure, expectations, the consistency required. Like we're talking about the very, elite at the top, which is a very small percentage. Whereas I know for a lot of lifters that I train, I coach, beginners, intermediates, very few
Yep.
kind of like intermediates, and sometimes I think they can look at more experienced or higher level lifters and feel as though, well, if that's what they're doing, if that's the expectation that they have, I need to follow the same as well. And in a roundabout way, kind of putting it onto like the limitations, the enjoyment, confidence, momentum as a lifter. I think that's where more obstacles, challenges come up because the expectation of somebody going to win Sheffield, a world title like yourself, there's things that have to be done from there. But it's always important to realize, okay, well, what is your current individual situation? Is that going to be beneficial? Like what you said there, what between 2018, 2022, not hitting a PR, it's like, all right, well, what is it that you're doing that for? Right. Well, enjoyment. Could you still do the
Yeah.
other things like playing with your daughter, doing X, Y, or Z? Yes. All right. Well, actually, it balances out that thought process of what am I actually doing it for? And then it falls back to, that enjoyment of training. If that kind of agree with that, that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Um, so yeah, going back to kind of the balance of enjoyment and programming. What's your kind of approach with that to make sure that the keeping the lifter building that momentum and keeping that confidence within their own training rather than like what we said about at the start about those limitations creeping in and those things maybe holding them back a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. No, I think it's really important in like writing individualized training that you get to know the person and have an understanding of what's important to them. Because while our one of our primary purposes and one of our primary points in powerlifting is 5 more pounds, 5 more pounds. We want to put more weight on the bar. Like the level of importance that is for each person is going to be a little different based on how competitive they are, how competitive they want to be, different things of that nature. So depending on how important that is might drive where you put different priorities in training. But let's just assume that that's, primary importance for everybody in this type of conversation. I look at it as I do agree with the idea that a happy lifter is a progressing lifter. Like we're all always happier when we're making progress. So what does that take? What does it need? Again, it's going to look different for everybody. So it's my job, if I'm writing training for somebody, to figure that out. I need to figure out what exercises, I need to figure out what protocols work better and best for people. And you have two different places where you can pull from. You have objective data, where you apply a stimulus and you measure that response and you can see what that rate of gain is to that stimulus. And you have the subjective response of exercises they like, exercises they don't like, exercises they despise, exercises they have low compliance with. If an exercise, if a lifter, and that's where it can differ, right? So Bulgarian split squats, for example, they're a highly hated exercise. Most power lifters dislike Bulgarian split squats for a variety of reasons. I don't like them, but they tend to show up really well and high in the objective measurements of rates of progress. Okay, because they show up in the objective rate of progress, I'm a lot more willing to embrace the suck on something that I don't really like. But now, if they're kind of mediocre or they're tying, say, a leg press or something else as quad development, I'm going to prioritize the thing that is higher up on the subjective fun category than not.
Yeah.
So being able to blend where those things sit can be really beneficial and important. Um, because at the end of the day, if leg press and Bulgarian split squats show to have a similar effect on training, if they have more fun with leg press, that's going to help with compliancy. That's going to increase the odds of success. It's not
Yeah.
going to guarantee it, but it's going to increase the odds.
Yeah. And I suppose that helps with that because another kind of thing I'm a big believer in is momentum. Maybe
Yeah.
that is just kind of a fancy word for consistency. But it keeps you moving, it keeps you moving forward. And with that, do you think that when you're looking at the program side of things, is um the flip side of that is having those exercises where sometimes, yes, you can kind of grit through Bulgarians or anything, and you've mentioned throughout this chat about lessons learned from training. Because another phrase that I'll say to clients and lifters is, the strength training allows you to get strong in the gym, but allow you to be strong outside of the gym as well. And I'm a big believer in that. Do you think sometimes there is maybe a point to put exercises in that kind of build that mental toughness that is a little bit of a challenge? Because again, this might be a little bit of a tangent, but we've spoken there about limitations and the positive reinforcement of that's just a story that you're telling yourself.
Yeah.
Sometimes when it's kind of that thing of no, actually this is going to be a challenge, like this is going to be tough. Is that does that have a place? Is that within a certain point in a lifter's journey, or is that something that is kind of like a bit pointless? What's kind of your take on that?
Oh, I do push back on that for sure. If a lifter comes to me and they're like, "Hey, can we not do these? They suck." Was that all? Is that the reason why you don't want to do them? Is just because it sucks? Like, because that's weakness. I thought you wanted to be strong, right? Now, if there's a legitimate reason and they hurt you, then we need to get them out of the way.
Yeah,
Now, there's also a balancing act to that. Like, I'm going to push back. I'm going to want them to try and embrace that suck, embrace that discomfort, and ask them, like, what do you think you can learn from pushing through this? What is this here to teach you? What is this discomfort teaching you? And try and push them down that way. And then at the same time, some people will just not have compliance with an exercise of that nature. And so if they're skipping it, then we got to pull it out. Or there needs to be a different strategy. I had a lifter who Bulgarian split squats or any of the split squat variations we did, he had a very low compliance rate with them. So, and this was his idea. He's like, what if we put it at the beginning of the day? He was doing his competition deadlift and a secondary bench press followed by that split squat. And I'm like, okay, we can do that. I've had other lifters before do well with split squats preceding deadlift in terms of getting them warmed up and prepared. So let's try it. Let's see how it goes. Um, and it increased the compliancy, and he was able to get the work in.
Nice.
So, like, there's a lot of different ways that we can move and manipulate those things and get creative and consider athlete preference, consider what helps increase compliancy, and without increasing compliancy, without decreasing health expressions too. Like the biggest way to tank somebody's expression of strength is through not being healthy.
Yeah. And with that, just going back to, I 100% agree with being the healthy side of things. I think it can be uh, speaking about that topic of sometimes we need to have things that are challenging but with a purpose. I think that's the thing that we've kind of like spoken about quite a
Mm-hmm.
lot today, because I think sometimes just doing something crazy hard for the sake of it, and ultimately breaking the lifter is kind of like, you said it there from, all right, well, why do you want Bulgarians taken out? What lesson are you gonna learn from that? Whereas actually, what I would say from there with the lifter that you mentioned about putting the Bulgarians at the start, as coaches, our job is to provide solutions. But actually, do
Yeah.
you think in that instance, the solution is for the uh, for the client, for the lifter to come up with the solution, which is developing their, mental skill set, if that makes sense.
Yeah. 100%. 100%. Like, there can be a ton of value in those moments. And sometimes we don't know the immediate value in that moment of what it's teaching us. Like one of the low hanging fruit examples I like to bring up in this moment of like embracing that discomfort is, look, at the end of the day, a lot of nothing what we do is comfortable. Whether it's a protocol or exercise we like, we're still doing things that are uncomfortable that challenge our bodies in a manner of discomfort. So I like to ask myself, well, or remind myself then, like, wow, I'm really skilled at being uncomfortable. That means I can do things with skill and precision in all other areas of my life while being in a state of discomfort. And the second I made that realization, that changed everything for one of the things that I try to do with mental health advocacy and podcasting and public speaking. My ability to deliver a message in speeches and public speaking in front of crowds skyrocketed. Whereas in college, I almost failed public speaking because I couldn't talk in front of anybody, even a group of friends. Like, I struggled. I had all kinds of hardships around speaking with clarity and meaning and purpose anytime there was a group of people, regardless of who they were. And now I've been able to give 45-minute keynote speeches in front of, like 50, like groups of 50 men at a men's halfway house and deliver it and crush it. Like, and that is, I credit powerlifting to helping me develop that skill. I wouldn't have been able to deliver that message if I wasn't able to just stand in that discomfort and do the thing anyway.
Yeah.
Because, like, I also participate in Toastmasters, which is a public speaking organization that helps you develop public speaking. And a lot of people that join the club will be like, well, you weren't nervous at all. I was. I was totally nervous that entire time that I delivered that speech. They're like, I had no idea. I'm like, I know. You don't, Just like in powerlifting, you don't experience doesn't get rid of nerves. You don't go out there for your third attempt squat and all of a sudden, because it's your fifth meet or your sixth meet or your 10th meet, you're miraculously no longer nervous.
Yeah,
No, you are learning the skill of being in that state of emotion and skillfully navigating your way through the situation, regardless of what the emotions are. Emotions are not the enemy. Your response and reaction to the emotion is the enemy.
yeah,
And when we learn that skill and we connect with those things, a whole lot of things can shift and change in your life. Not
yeah,
just your success rate on your third attempt squat, but your ability to advocate for yourself to get a raise at work. Boom. You're gonna be able to articulate and uh, position yourself in a more meaningful way in those situations when you can navigate and stand in that discomfort.
yeah, yeah. I think that's something that I speak about quite a lot with lifters and clients because that progress, that next step is beyond the kind of that comfort zone. Whereas I think sometimes it's hard to uh, understand it until you've like experienced it, like what you were saying there, speaking in front of people and getting that done, and saying, "Oh well, I'm not going to do the Bulgarians because it's uncomfortable." Whereas that uncomfortableness, it doesn't last forever. That nervousness doesn't last forever. It's kind of that thing of, yeah, you've done it, and then it's like, oh, okay, because that's another thing is that perception. It's always going to be worse than what it actually is. You said
Yeah.
there about public speaking. I'm going to mumble my words, going to say the wrong thing, going to forget what I was going to say. Bulgarian split squats. I'm gonna struggle. I'm not gonna be able to do the weight. I'm gonna lose my balance. Whereas actually, it's like, well, actually, you did it, and it only lasted 2 minutes or however it was. And then it's like you can look back. It's like that roller coaster analogy. Everyone's scared of doing the roller coaster, and afterwards, it's like, oh yeah, I really want to go and do that. And talking about other keywords that we've said there. Confidence, momentum, consistency, progress. All those things come when
Yeah.
you realize that, right, that doesn't actually last forever. And then, again, going back to what we said at the start about limitations, all of a sudden those barriers get a little bit lower, and then you can start adding a little bit more. So, yeah, I think that's a useful way to look at it. Quite a lot of topics, tangents,
Yeah.
information spoken about there, Ross. But the one of the last questions I like to ask is, from everything that we've spoken about there, and for everyone listening, what would be your take-home points or words of wisdom that we've spoken about today?
I think probably one of the biggest things that comes to mind is just reminding yourself that this entire pursuit of strength is skill development, whether it be for the act of lifting itself or a way to connect with something to apply outside. And when we do that, to me, it enriches and elevates the journey because we're getting and gaining more than just stronger muscles. Um, like even last week, I was going to I was working some single leg RDLs and I had 4 sets to do. And 4 sets of single leg work is always a little bit more because you have to do each leg 10 times. And I was getting done with my third set. I think it was either my second or my third set. And I had that moment. I had that voice popped up in my head like, oh man, I don't want to do anymore. And I like had to stop and pause and have this like internal conversation with myself. Like, why don't you want to do more? It's just, I don't like it. It's tough. 20 reps in a set because you got to do 10 in each one. I'm like, dude, your limitations are coming up. You're not being like that limitation devil is talking loudly at you right now. And you have a choice to make. You can embrace this moment of discomfort or you can move on. And you embrace the moment of discomfort, you move on, you finish the session and you get done and there's a sense of pride and the accomplishment in completing the work. But I tend to think too, then that's still a distraction, pride being a distraction, because what really is happening in a moment like that, the skill you're developing in a moment like that, again, is sitting in that discomfort and navigating it anyways. Because what that does is life's going to have uncomfortable moments. I'm going to go out on a limb and see that probably most of your audience might be male lifters because that tends to be a large part of the demographic for powerlifting podcasts. And I apologize to you women out there if that's not the case for you, but I think you might appreciate some of these ideas. There's that adage a lot of times where you hear dudes say like, "Oh, I wish she would be less emotional. I wish my wife would be less emotional and more rational." Well, women are emotional beings and creatures. And when we can stand in the emotional discomfort of them having a moment, we can more skillfully allow them to just express their moment and it goes away. But the second we try and stop them from expressing themselves, we hold on to it, we create a binding action to it, and that now they're going to be more mad at us instead of just letting them be and standing in the discomfort. So, like to me, I think about it when I'm able to skillfully stand in the discomfort of any of those emotional moments, particularly with the people I love, and watch it unfold and see how much easier it is when I just let it be than when I try to stop it. It's amazing, absolutely amazing. So, skill development, what are you learning in this moment on a deeper level that you can apply to life? And then at the same time, being understanding to making the mistakes along the way. Like skill development doesn't mean skill perfection, it means development. So we're going to make mistakes and errors along the way, and that's okay. Learn and grow.
Yeah. I think that was some really good points and analogies to finish off from there. I really liked about the skill development rather than perfection because with anything if you're always chasing perfection, you kind of setting yourself up for disappointment.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of information out there around exercises, set reps, programming, all that sort of stuff. Whereas I think going beyond that and like what you said there about going into a little bit of a deeper level that allows you to get more out of that program, more of what you're currently doing, as opposed to kind of thinking, well, why can't I do this? Why aren't I at this position right now? Because I've done this. And actually, the benefits of thinking about the things that we've spoken about today, go way beyond the glory of powerlifting. There's more to it than that, because yeah, I think the benefits outside of powerlifting, strength training more broadly, when we balance, the enjoyment side of things and, sitting in that discomfort rather than, the negative side of things, comparing ourselves to where other people are. Why aren't we at this position? This is why I'm doing this. I'm never going to be able to progress as much. Like I think that mindset shift. Is really useful and really powerful. Thanks a lot, Ross, for taking the time to jump on today. Really, really enjoyed chatting with you. For everyone listening, whether it's coaches, lifters listening, where could people find the content and information you put out there, or reach out to you and ask you any questions, Ross?
Yeah, man. I definitely appreciate it. I always enjoy being able to share some of my ideas and message and what we can do and create. My personal Instagram account is ross.leppala, and I am the host of the Intentional Athlete podcast, which can be found on all podcast platforms. And my website is tiaexp.com if you want to check out any of those things and offerings that I have on there. And obviously, I also coach for Reactive Training Systems and Mike to Share, which is, man, that's fun. It's fun.
Yeah.
One more rant, one more
Yeah.
closing rant.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when I was an engineer, did that for 12 years, and it was a great job. I got to do a lot of cool stuff. I got to fly around in a helicopter all over in the state of Alaska, designing remote mountaintop communication sites. Like we did some cool stuff, but I still had a really hard time getting to work on time. I lived about 15 minutes from work, supposed to be there between 8 and 8:30. I could never get there before 8. I struggled all the time. When I switched to coaching for Mike full time, I was instantaneously switched to 6 a.m. Like I didn't even try. I was just up and ready to go. And again, it's this realization that it's not even powerlifting coaching. It's the fact that I get to do work that is helping other people be better, stronger versions of themselves. And the thing to connect with and highlight from there is like getting back to that why. Why do you do this? The closer you are to your core why, the happier you're going to be with what you're doing in pursuits in life. And it won't feel like work. And it finally, like that was that old adage, find something you love to do and you won't work and figure out how to get paid and you won't work a day in your life. I'm like, oh, wow. Like that makes so much more sense now. Nobody really told me what that really means or how to like connect with that. Here it is.
Yeah.
So that was a really cool moment and epiphany for me in life.
Yeah, I can imagine. I say the same to people. I'll stop doing what I do when I stop enjoying it. This is 12 years later, and I'm still doing it. It's um, yeah, I think that finding that why is important, and it takes time. It takes time. Sometimes, it just kind of like happens, and you realize, oh yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
I think that is the natural journey of lifters, coaches, anybody out there. But yeah, it does when it does get to that point. It is a really really good feeling, a really good feeling. I thought that was a really good way to end that there, Ross. So. Thanks a lot for taking the time to jump on. Thanks a lot to everyone listening, and I will see you all at the next episode.